We all love Joe Rogan. I was watching a couple minutes of his podcast today, and he had on a female guest. I didn't even catch her name because I was kind of halfway out the door when I heard it. But this story was so amazing that I wanted to share it with you guys. If you're new to the show, please hit the thumbs up button and think about subscribing, because we walk every single day together. And if you actually join me by walking every single day, in the next 2 or 3 months, you'll start to notice that you start to lose quite a bit of weight, and you'll start to feel happier on the inside. And that's always important, that you feel good. And if walking each day helps us feel good, then why not join me and walk? Where you are right now, the weather is perfect. Where I am, it's pushing 90 degrees already here in Phoenix. So anyway, guys, Joe Rogan makes this statement that I think is true. We have our senses, right? The sense of sight, hearing, smelling, touching, feeling, the whole 9 yards, right? If you were to lose any particular sense, for example, you lose your eyesight, a lot of us believe that your hearing will get stronger, right? That blind people can probably hear a little bit better than the rest of us. Do we know if that's true? Probably not, but it's kind of one of those sayings that we've kind of grown up with, that when you're missing one of your 5 senses, your other senses are going to kind of pick up the slack and become even stronger. He used the example of a blind kid being able to use echolocation and ride a skateboard, which is kind of crazy because I'm not blind and I still can't ride a skateboard, and neither can many of you guys. Why did we bring this up? Well, guys, I recruit special ed teachers, and we're constantly talking about kids that are autistic. Well, today Joe Rogan's guest was bringing up the idea that there's some preliminary findings that suggest autistic kids might actually be able to communicate with us telepathically. Now, I know you're thinking this sounds crazy, but what happened was this woman started reaching out to some school principals and stuff that were her friends, that started sharing really weird emails from parents. And the parents would basically say, hey, I don't know if this is a miracle and it's just something with me and my autistic child, but basically every single time I'm thinking of something, my nonverbal autistic child knows what I'm thinking of. You know, for example, imagine thinking, I wish somebody would open that door and grab the newspaper. You're not saying it out loud, but all of a sudden your autistic child makes a run for the front door to grab the newspaper. They also had situations where nonverbal autistic kids would be in a classroom with a teacher and a paraprofessional working, closely together with her or him. And all of a sudden, they're able to determine that the words that they're reading aren't English, but Portuguese. So imagine this nonverbal kid all of a sudden starts writing down words. They're not English words. They look like they're just letters bunched together. But when they checked it, they being the teacher and the paraprofessional, they found out that the child was writing in Portuguese. That's kind of amazing. This same child supposedly on another occasion wrote in Spanish. Now keep in mind, this was an American-speaking parent, or an American-speaking, English-speaking parents, an American student. How the heck did the autistic student learn how to write in Portuguese and Spanish? They believe it's because maybe their parents were learning or reading or writing in Portuguese. Isn't that crazy? Of course it's crazy. Is it true? You can't believe everything you hear, but because we all know that there's so many kids in this country that are growing up autistic, we all want this to be true. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Here's the crazy thing. What if it actually is true? What if nonverbal kids actually have activated a part of their mind where they actually can read other people's thoughts? Here's the crazy idea that came up on the show. What if we actually all have this ability, but because we're constantly talking and bullshitting with one another, we don't really work on the ability to read each other's thoughts? And then, of course, there's Jesse, I come from the idea that we're already reading each other's minds. We're making these sounds out of our mouth that stand for words and ideas, right? Other people hear those sounds and they're able to translate them into thoughts and ideas based on the words and phrases that you're saying. So I believe we actually are already reading each other's minds. We just interpret it as, us hearing each other's voices and stuff. So the question is, are autistic kids telepathic? This guest went over emails from parents who thought they were experiencing miracles with their kids that were nonverbal, being able to read their minds. But here's the problem. As she started reading more and more emails from parents and teachers, she started to realize that, hey, this can't just be one miracle if it's happening all the time to parents of autistic kids and the teachers that are working with those kids all the time. So apparently, it's not a singular event. There's a lot of anecdotal stories about this. You know what sucks? We've told ourselves somewhere along the lines that anecdotal means bullshit. What anecdotal means is that it's not in some sort of study. It's just word of mouth. But just like a rumor, if enough people say something, after a while it becomes true. So that's the problem with anecdotal stories. They can be complete bullshit, but if you hear them enough times, they become true. But if you look at the other side of the coin, that's what's so crappy. Yes, people make up stories all the time, but occasionally we find out that these anecdotal stories, or things that start out anecdotally, end up having some truth to them. And again, could you imagine if all of a sudden we have all these autistic kids that seemingly came out of nowhere? Some people blame it on the Diet Coke that women drink while they're pregnant, right? Some people think it's other causes. What if it's some wonderful gift that they have, this ability to communicate? And Joe Rogan was bringing up the idea that what if our military is using autistic kids to telepathically communicate with aliens? And then it was funny because out of the blue, the guest of Joe Rogan says, no, I don't believe that. And I loved it. It was like, yes, she believes one crazy thing, but she doesn't believe another. And the only reason she believes the one crazy thing is because she's seen enough anecdotes to start believing it. What's interesting is every now and then we'll meet an adult person with autism, and they always fool me. They sound like normal people to me. And I suppose they are normal. They just have this communication disorder. But when they have 1,000,001 subscribers and a very popular YouTube channel, it's hard to look at them and think, oh, they don't have the ability to communicate. I think as humans, no matter what our limitations are, with Kaizen and baby steps, you're able to get better and better and better. And some of these autistic kids end up becoming adults that have a lot of interesting things to say, in my opinion. So apparently, as they become better at verbally communicating as they get older, they're probably slowly but surely degrading or losing their ability to be telepathic, because I have yet to hear one adult with autism say, yeah, I can read people's minds. If they can and they're not sharing that with us, then maybe they are nonverbal. There was a 13-year-old daughter of a family in Mexico that confirmed she could read her parents' mind. They would draw something kind of like behind their backs or whatever, or they wouldn't show it to their daughter, and yet their daughter knew exactly what it was that they were drawing without being told. So when you start to, let's say you draw a box with a little ball on top of it, and all of a sudden your autistic daughter draws a box with a ball on top of it with her Crayola, that would start to weird people out. Apparently that's what happened with this Mexican girl. There was a lady that posited, So the guest was actually saying that she believes that they can actually kind of use their parents' eyes and ears, and they said that they're either using their parents' senses or there's some sort of merge of consciousness. which just seems magical, doesn't it? I mean, it seems crazy, of course, but could you imagine you're looking at a stop sign and one of your autistic children can see that same stop sign through your eyes? That is just fascinating. There was a blind boy that couldn't read an eye chart, but when his mother looked at the eye chart, all of a sudden he could read it. That's crazy. So apparently it's not just one of these autistic things. There's people that have lost certain senses, and yet they're able to do these things. Are these one-offs? Are they able to do it consistently? Is it like a muscle that you can strengthen over time? Or is it like an hourglass of sand that gets weaker with time? Who knows? Either way, I thought it was fantastic. So here's my question for you. Let's talk about this, Venters. Have you ever been so close to somebody? Maybe it's a twin brother or sister. Maybe it's a best friend. Maybe it's a dad. Whoever it might be. Have you ever been so close to somebody that you actually were starting to think like them? You started finishing their sentences? You ever see twins do that, where they start talking, or where one starts talking and the other finishes their sentence? Do those things happen just out of coincidence? When you're thinking about a new cell phone and all of a sudden you get cell phone ads on your telephone, is that your phone reading your mind, which it probably can't do? Or is that actually you predicting the future? See, this is what's so crazy. Nowadays, our phones, we don't pick them up and call people. We pick them up and text people. But if any of you guys are too young to remember corded phones, ask your parents, because we used to call each other on these corded, antiquated phones, and sometimes we would pick up the phone to dial, and the person that you were getting ready to call was already dialing you. Now, I've talked about this multiple times, but there's something that I never mentioned that I'm going to mention now. Notice that when we have these memories, we remember picking up the phone to call our best friend Becky, right? And Becky was already on the phone because a split second before that, she already dialed our number, right? So she was right there on the phone. Notice that many of us don't have stories of some stranger being on the phone, right? You pick up the phone to call your best friend Becky, and then John, the telemarketer salesman, is on the phone. Those things didn't happen. That's what makes these memories so crazy for me. Whenever I was trying to call somebody, it was them that was already on the phone waiting for me. Another thing that we used to do all the time is we would predict what song was coming on. You remember, you'd be thinking about a certain song and you would turn on the car stereo or car radio, and all of a sudden, there's that song. Happens all the time. I think when we're thinking about deodorant, or we're thinking about clothing, or we're thinking about a TV show, and then it pops up on our TV or our phone, I think that might just be us actually making a little mini prediction about the future. I really do. Think about this, guys. What if that's the great secret that the government's hiding from us? That they actually know there's something special about being human beings that's a little bit different than the animals. Maybe the animals all do have some mild telepathic powers, but what if we as humans have predictive energies and powers and abilities? But again, because of the way our life is set up, we don't really strengthen those muscles. God damn it, Jesse, you're onto something, I know. What if my phone was just spying on me while I was talking to special education teachers about autism, and then it happened to put this Joe Rogan video in my feed where they're talking about kids with autism? That makes more sense, Jesse. Let's take the magical powers away from us and put it back into the phone that's spying on us, because that's what's really happening. And the scary thing is that probably is what's really happening, but what if it's not? What if it really is our brain guessing what's next and we're right? At Carol Kingsafer says, we are one consciousness, connected in the ether, able to communicate without words. We have spiritual gifts, and this is one of them. Wouldn't that be neat? I always wonder why old people aren't a little bit more excited. When I was younger, you would see a person in their 90s, and it's like certainly they must know that every single day could be their very last, because let's be honest, 90-year-olds drop like flies, right? But at the same time, there's a certain chill, there's a certain relaxed nature that our 80 and 90-year-old friends and family have. Our brothers and sisters that are anciently elderly, if you will, they've got a certain calmness about them. It's almost as if they know something we don't, that you might as well just enjoy your time here on the earth, because you never know when it's your time to be called up to that next world. But I used to look at elderly people and think, my God, they must just not even want to go to sleep at night, because what if they don't wake up? And then you realize that the special gift that the elderly have, that many of us that are younger are lacking, is that appreciation just for the day. Every day is a real gift, and I'd imagine the older you get, the more you're able to recognize that. And wouldn't it be cool if when we pass away, we don't even realize it? Because they say that you just go right to the next life, right? What if you took your last breath and your last vision here and you close your eyes forever, and instantly you're opening them up in another world? Do I want it to be heaven? Yes, I want it to be heaven, but if it's another galaxy far, far away, so be it. What if life never ends? It's just one continuous movie going from one world to the next. Mr. Newfie says it's a merged consciousness. Do you guys think that deep down we're kind of like this giant organism where we're actually all connected to one another? I remember there used to be this G.I. Joe cartoon, and there were these two twins. They were the leaders of the Crimson Guard. I forget their names, but they were twins. If you're a G.I. Joe fan, I'm sure you remember the twins on the bad side, right, on Cobra. And anyway, when you kicked one, the other one felt the pain. And I've heard of twins, when something happens to their brother or sister, they actually know about it. They can feel it. Do you guys think there's something to that? Are we, people without twins, missing out on some sort of cosmic relationship that only twins have? I always think it's sad whenever you hear somebody say, hey, my identical twin passed away back in such and such a year, because it must be really hard to take life for granted if you're that surviving twin. Because it's like, hey, I know at any time I could be breathing my last breath because my twin brother or my twin sister breathed their last breath, X amount of years ago. 343 Films says, describing a drawn picture without seeing the page is absolutely wild. It's straight out of Star Wars when Mace and Yoda are having the little child Anakin do exactly that. So that's really what we're talking about here. If you remember from watching Star Wars, we were talking about the Force, right? And I remember, because I'm one of these people that I've only watched a handful of Star Warses. I watched the original 3, and then I watched like 3 or 4 of the ones that came out in the 90s and 2000s, and then I lost interest because I don't want to watch a movie series that has an infinite number of movies to it, But one of the things that you take from Star Wars, just watching the original 3, was the fact that there was this force that Luke was trying to tap into. At least he was in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, right? He was trying to become like his father. The only problem is his father was Darth Vader, right? But anyway, if you think about it, that's what we're kind of describing here, a situation where they don't have to use words. They can use this imaginary, or not imaginary, this invisible force called telepathy. What she was basically telling Joe is that what if autistic kids are thinking and active on the inside, the same as you and me, but when it comes to spitting out words, for some reason it's just impossible for them. They need time to work and develop that muscle. Well, that's how this job is. You're trying to explain something that you saw on a video that you thought was fascinating. But just like the autistic kids themselves, you find it really challenging to talk about it. That's one thing that I could probably help any brand new person to YouTube that's thinking about doing their own channel, is that there's all these little challenges that you don't think of. You know, there's going to be something that you want to explain to people, and when you hear other people explain it, like Joe Rogan, it just sounds so wonderfully entertaining. And then when you try to explain something, it just sounds like you learned how to speak yesterday. Those are things that I'm working on. That's my goal, Lord. Help me get there. I'll meet you halfway, Lord. Help me find a new way to communicate with people that makes them excited and joyous to hear what I have to say. Scott Boyd says, I can read minds when I'm on shrooms. So he wrote this probably as a goofy little comment, right? Wondering what type of reactions and comments and replies he would get. But there is some truth to this. Back in the day, I would have friends that would do certain substances that would make them trip. And a lot of times they would tell me stories about how, hey, me and Billy, we were looking, at the wall, and we started seeing the same apparition, and we started seeing the same geometrical shapes, and something was talking to us, and we both heard it. You start to hear weird stories like this. We automatically, as sober people, say, oh my God, quit doing drugs, you sound like a nut. But what if there is something to this? What if that is a way where we can tap into something that normally we wouldn't be able to tap into? And there's another question for you, Venters. If there was some magic pill that you could take, and while you took it, it gave you 4 or 5 hours of clairvoyance where you could see into the future, where you could read people's minds, where you could do things that were impossible, would that be the type of drug that you would actually try? When we think of drugs now, we think of somebody trying to get this physical high or this physical orgasmic feeling from it. But what if a drug didn't do any of that? What if it just made you think like Einstein or Beethoven? What if it made you think like Jesus? Would that be something worth taking? There's a question for you. The Two Gals says, I shared consciousness with my mother a lot when I was younger, and as an adult have had glimmers of it, a few of them profound. That's probably one of those situations where I bet if you were her dad, there's probably a lot of times where she talks and he probably looks over at her and says, oh my God, you are your mother's daughter. You're just like your mom. I think this might not be a magical thing in this girl's situation. I use situation a lot too. In the circumstance dealing with this woman and her mom, I think it might just be the fact that you are half your mother and you're half your father. And sometimes you take after one more than the other. Does that mean that moms and daughters can finish each other's sentences? Yeah, again, if someone's your best friend, pretty soon you're going to use a lot of the same lingo. You're going to find that you enjoy the same movies, that you dislike the same type of character types out there. You're going to notice a lot of things. When I was best friends with my buddy Chris, I remember we would start to think a lot like, hey, do you want to go to Metro Center? Yeah, let's go to the mall. Let's do this. Let's do that. And a lot of times we thought somewhat similarly. And that's where I'm starting to get weird. How do I surmise all this stuff in 30 minutes? You can't, Jesse. You can barely speak. Oh, I know. I love this crazy stuff. I love walking with you guys every day. I'm going to say a prayer that one day I will find more people like Mala and Sean that like walking with me. And I look forward to meeting you. With that being said, have a great day. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow.